It was on a very hot afternoon when Adaora heard a loud, angry pounding on the door. "Open up!" Then came a forceful bang, like whoever was outside wasn't planning to wait. It was just her and her daughter, Jade, at home. A small single-family house on a quiet street. Her husband, Chuka, had gone on one of his usual weekend trips. He said it was work, but this time he didn't say much. Her heart was racing. She didn't know what to do. Fear gripped her. Her hands started shaking. Then came a louder sound, a heavy thud. The front door gave way. They broke in. 4 tall men stepped inside, medium build, cold eyes, and heavy guns in their hands. It felt like war had come into her living room. "We need the money," one of them said. "The one your husband brought back from his recent trip." Adaora looked up, trying to stay calm. "What trip?" "My husband hasn't been around for months," she said, doing her best to protect him. But what the men didn't know was that the call they got, the one that led them here, was a setup. And it wasn't the first time. It's been building for years. One lie after another. One secret too many. Their cups were full. Adaora had lived in the same apartment for 6 years. A quiet street on the edge of the city. Nothing too fancy. The kind of place where neighbors nod but don't really talk, and you hear more sirens than birds. Her life wasn't busy. She stayed home full-time. No job, no side hustle. Not because she didn't want to work, but because Chuka said he had it handled. So she cleaned, cooked, kept the house in shape, and made sure Jade had what she needed. Jade was 6, sharp, thoughtful, always asking questions that felt too big for her age. Adaora tried to answer them with care. Their apartment wasn't big, but it was clean. 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen, and a couch that had seen better days. She and Jade shared a quiet rhythm. Mornings were for cartoons and cereal. Evenings, they'd read stories or watch something light. Adaora didn't complain. It wasn't the life she imagined, but it was theirs. Chuka wasn't home much. He moved like someone always in a rush. Weekend trips, late-night phone calls. Most times, he said he worked in logistics, arranging deliveries, managing routes, just moving things around. But the details were always vague. Adaora didn't press. As long as rent was paid and Jade had lunch money, she let it go. That's how it had been for years. He dressed sharp, always clean sneakers, fresh shirts. He had a calm way of talking that made people listen. Adaora knew he wasn't just working in a warehouse somewhere. But she also knew there were things better left alone. His money came in often, and it came in big. Sometimes he'd leave a wad of cash in the drawer like it was nothing. That quiet luxury made people respect him, but it made Adaora nervous. They didn't have a car, but they got by. Jade's school was 3 blocks away. Groceries were a 15-minute walk or a short bus ride. Adaora didn't mind walking. It gave her time to think. Most of her days looked the same. Laundry, dishes, vacuuming, waiting on Chuka's next check-in. Some days she thought about applying for a job, but she didn't want to shake the boat. Chuka liked control. And for peace to last, some things had to stay how he wanted them. Still, there were good things. Jade was healthy. Bills were current. They had cable, food in the fridge, and a roof that didn't leak. No drama from neighbors. It was the kind of life that looked okay from the outside. But Adaora could feel something shifting, something just under the surface. Like a quiet warning that the steady life she'd built was on a timer. Jade was everything to Adaora. Her only child, her shadow, her joy. She asked a lot of questions, especially about her dad. Why is Daddy always gone? Why does he whisper on the phone? Adaora kept her answers short. He's working, she'd say. He's busy. But the questions kept coming, and Jade wasn't the type to forget. She noticed things. How Chuka left without hugging them. How he avoided eye contact some nights. Adaora tried to cover it all with normal routines. Pancakes in the morning, stories at night, walks to the corner store. It worked most days. But the silence between her and Chuka was starting to feel louder than any argument. They rarely fought, they just drifted. He gave her money, she gave him space, and in between it all, she kept Jade close and prayed that was enough. The weekend started like any other. Chuka packed a small duffel and said he had to go out of town for work. He kissed Jade on the forehead, told Adaora he'd call. No details, no timeline. She watched from the window as he got into the same black sedan that always picked him up. She stood there a little longer than usual. Something about the way the car pulled off didn't sit right. That night, she barely slept. She kept hearing things, the hallway door creaking, muffled sounds outside. At some point, a car idled nearby for too long. She peeked through the blinds. No one she recognized. Just a man in a hoodie, looking at his phone. Maybe it was nothing, but her gut wouldn't let it go. Something about this trip felt different. Sunday afternoon came heavy. The sky outside was bright, but inside the apartment, it felt tense. Jade was coloring on the floor, humming to herself. Adaora was in the kitchen, wiping down the counter for the third time. The fan buzzed low in the corner, but the heat still clung to everything. She checked her phone. No message from Chuka, no missed calls, just silence. She kept glancing toward the door. Maybe it was her nerves, maybe it was instinct. Something felt off. The kind of off you can't explain with words. Just a tightness in your chest, like you're holding your breath without realizing it. She looked at Jade and smiled, but inside, she knew something was coming. And once it arrived, nothing would go back to normal. The knock came hard, sharp and angry, like the person outside had no patience left. Jade looked up from her drawing. Adaora froze. She wiped her hands on her skirt and stepped out of the kitchen slowly. The pounding came again, louder this time. "Open up!" a voice shouted, deep and rough. Then a heavy thud, the kind that makes your stomach drop. She grabbed Jade and pulled her close. Her heart was racing. There was no time to think. The door cracked. Then it gave in. 4 men walked in like they owned the place. No masks, just sharp eyes and heavy guns. The small living room suddenly felt too tight, too hot. "We need the money," one of them said. "The one your husband brought back from his last trip." Adaora stood still, holding Jade behind her. "What trip?" she said, keeping her voice steady. "My husband hasn't been around in months." But they weren't listening. They ransacked the place, sofa cushions tossed. Fridge yanked open. Even the cereal boxes were cut open and dumped in the sink. Still, nothing. And the more they searched, the more it shifted, from loud confidence to quiet confusion. One of them looked at the others and said, "You sure this is the house?" Another muttered, "This doesn't feel right." And that's because it wasn't. They didn't know the call they got was never about finding money. It was bait from someone who'd been watching for a long time. Someone who remembered a voice from a robbery years ago. Someone who'd waited for the right moment. The apartment was never meant to give them what they wanted. It was meant to hold them in place, slow them down, expose them. And now that they were here, exposed, desperate, and still empty-handed, the trap was already in motion. They were still turning the place upside down, but the energy had shifted. One of the men, the tallest one with a scar on his chin, stepped back and wiped sweat off his forehead. He looked around, eyes narrowing. "Yo," he said quietly, "this ain't adding up." The others kept tearing through drawers, but he didn't move. He was watching now. Not the house. Them. His own crew. "Where's the stash? Where's the safe? Man goes on a trip, comes back loaded, and don't hide nothing?" he said. "Why's it feel like we're standing in the middle of somebody else's plan?" Another guy, the one in the black hoodie, shot back, "What? You scared now? You think this lady outsmarted us?" He kicked the bedroom door open. Empty. Clothes on hangers. A fan spinning slow in the corner. Nothing out of place. Nothing hidden. Just regular life. The scarred one took a deep breath, like something was sitting heavy on his chest. You ever get that feeling? Like we walked into something deeper than we meant to? But it was already too late. The plan had been set days ago. This wasn't just a bad lead. It was a trap. It had been nearly 3 years since Marlon was robbed. He still remembered the fear. Not just the guns or the way they barked commands, but one voice that stood out in the chaos. Calm. Sharp. Like the man had done it before. Marlon was tied up on the floor that night, face down in his own house, praying they'd leave his family alive. They took everything. Cash, jewelry, his late father's Rolex, but it was that voice that haunted him more than the loss. And even after he tried to forget, it kept coming back in flashes. Months later, by accident, he heard that same voice again in a video, a podcast interview. Just a random clip shared by a friend about small business success stories in the city. The man's name? Chuka. He was talking about his journey, how he built something out of nothing. But Marlon froze. That voice. That exact tone. The polite way he said bro when making a point. It was him, no doubt in his mind. Marlon didn't report it. He watched, studied, waited. And when he figured out where Chuka lived, he didn't call the cops. He called his people, men who could break into places quietly. Men who'd lost things too. But he didn't tell them the full story. Just gave them an address and told them, there's money in that house. A lot of it. You'll find it in the bedroom closet or behind the fridge. He didn't care if they found anything. He just wanted the mask to come off. He wanted the thief exposed, right where he felt safest. Chuka returns home from his business trip late in the evening. The house is too quiet. The lights are on. But Adaora doesn't greet him at the door like she usually does. He notices the front lock feels tampered with. Inside, things look clean. Too clean. Almost like someone tried to erase something. Adaora acts normal, but distant. Jade is already asleep. Chuka walks through the living room slowly, noticing small things out of place. The picture frame slightly tilted, the cushions refluffed in a way he didn't recognize. His gut tightens. He's been on the other side of break-ins. He knows what cleanup looks like. Someone was here, and they weren't looking for jewelry. They were looking for him. And just like that, the hunter feels hunted. They sat at the edge of the bed. Chuka had just come out of the shower, towel around his neck, the TV playing something neither of them was watching. Adaora finally spoke. Some men came here yesterday. Her voice was quiet but steady. 4 of them. They broke down the door, asked about some money you brought home. Chuka froze, slowly turning his head. They had guns, Chuka. They pointed one at Jade. He blinked, then stood like he couldn't hear her. What are you talking about? He said. But she saw it. The slight shake in his hand. Don't lie to me, she said, rising. I've lived with you too long not to know when something's off. Who are those men? What did you do? Chuka didn't answer, just walked out of the room like he needed air. But really, he needed time to think. He wasn't expecting this. By morning, Jade had a fever. Adaora found her curled up, cheeks flushed, and eyes glassy. She wouldn't speak, just kept pointing to the door and crying. Adaora held her close, wiped her down, but the fear from yesterday hadn't left. Not for her daughter, and not for her. She could still hear the sound of that door crashing in, feel the thud in her chest when the gunman shouted, "Where's the money?" She called Chuka, told him to bring medicine. He came back quiet, like a man being followed. While Jade slept, Adaora watched him move around the house, double-checking the locks, peeking through curtains, jumping at small sounds. He wasn't just shaken, he was scared. And Adaora finally understood. Whatever was going on wasn't new. Chuka had been living 2 lives, and one of them had just knocked on their front door. That night, after Jade had calmed down and the fever had broken, Adaora sat across from Chuka at the kitchen table. She didn't ask for explanations, she just watched him. They didn't take anything, she said, but they came with names. Yours, your last trip. Chuka cleared his throat. People talk. Maybe it's a mistake. But Adaora wasn't buying it. You've been acting strange for months. Now men with guns are in our living room. And you still want me to believe this is random? Chuka rubbed his face with both hands. "I never meant for this to touch you," he said. His voice cracked, not from guilt, but from pressure. Adaora leaned in, eyes sharp. "Then tell me the truth, because right now it's already touched us. And next time, we might not be so lucky." In a rundown apartment on the west side, the four men sat in silence, breathing hard. Sweat still clung to their shirts. One of them tossed a half-eaten sandwich on the table. "We found nothing. Not $1, he muttered. "I don't like this. That call felt too clean." They'd been in the game long enough to know when something didn't sit right. The way the woman stood her ground. The way the house felt untouched. Like somebody wanted them to walk into that setup. One of them pulled out a cheap burner phone. "Should we call that number back?" he asked. "And say what?" Another snapped. "That we walked into a family home and scared a kid for nothing?" The fourth man just shook his head. This ain't Chuka's usual game, he's always straight. But no one really believed that anymore. The room filled with doubt. Silence. And then the phone buzzed. Unknown number. They stared at it. Didn't answer. It buzzed again. Whoever set the trap wasn't done yet. The apartment felt quieter than usual. Not peaceful, just heavy. Jade was curled up on the couch, her cheeks warm with fever. Adaora sat nearby with a damp cloth in hand, her eyes flicking between the clock and the hallway. Chuka had returned the night after the break-in, saying nothing felt off at the airport, no delay, no signal of trouble. He didn't even ask what happened at home. Adaora had waited, for him to ask, for him to explain, but he didn't. She studied him now the way you study a stranger in a waiting room. He moved through the kitchen like everything was normal, humming under his breath, checking his phone with quick glances, stepping outside to take calls in a whisper. She wanted to scream, "Who are you?" But she didn't, not yet. Jade coughed behind her, soft and weak. Adaora touched her forehead and felt the heat rise again. And as Chuka walked back in, brushing his hands like he'd just tossed out trash, she saw it. That look in his eyes. Not guilt, not fear, just distance. Like the man she married had slipped out of himself. And whoever this was, he was hiding something. Chuka stood in the shadows across the street. His phone lit up with a number he didn't recognize. He answered without saying anything. A voice came through, low but clear. "We went to that address, searched everywhere. Nothing. Just some woman and a kid." There was a pause. Whoever sent that tip knew too much. It wasn't random. It felt like a trap. The line went quiet for a moment. Then the voice added, "We're done. Nobody's talking, and we don't want heat. But you should know. Someone's watching. We could all feel it." Chuka didn't respond. He sat there, phone still at his ear, staring out the windshield. The man on the call never mentioned Adaora, never said Chuka's name, but it was clear. The setup wasn't just about money. Someone was pulling strings, and they were getting closer. Marlon hadn't heard back from anyone. No message, no clue, just silence. That evening, he drove near the neighborhood, keeping his distance. He parked 2 streets away and watched from his window. A few minutes later, Chuka stepped out of his building, calm, talking to someone, laughing, alive, free. Marlon's jaw tightened. The setup didn't work, or maybe the men bailed. Either way, Chuka was still walking around like nothing happened. As Marlon pulled off, his mind was racing. "So you're still breathing, huh?" he muttered. "Okay, maybe I'll handle it myself." Adaora stood in the hallway, arms folded. "They came for you, Chuka. You're lying." He tried to dodge the question, giving her half smiles and soft excuses. But she didn't budge. "Strangers with guns came into our home, and you're acting like nothing happened. Who are you, really?" That night, while Jade lay asleep with a low fever, Adaora sat on the floor beside her, folding small clothes into a travel bag. She wasn't ready to leave just yet, but she would be soon. Across town, Marlon laid a photo and an address on his table. No more calls. Chuka was alone when the phone rang. Unknown number. No greeting, just a voice. "We know what you did. It's your turn now." Then silence. He stood up and looked through the blinds. The street was empty, but it didn't feel empty. Adaora zipped up the small bag and glanced at Jade, then at Chuka still standing by the window, pale and still. She didn't need him to confess anymore. Some secrets don't need words. And outside, the night was waiting, patient, steady, and closing in. They say secrets die in silence, but not his. Long after the house emptied, after Adaora was gone and Marlin had vanished back into the city, Chuka stayed by the window. Still, watching, waiting. He couldn't say what for exactly. A knock, a name, maybe just the sound of his own lies catching up. Because when you build a life on shadows, the light doesn't ask permission. It just shows up. What would you do if the person you trusted most was hiding a dangerous secret? If this story gripped you, let us know your thoughts in the comments. What part hit you the hardest? What would you do in Adaora's shoes? And if you haven't yet, be sure to like, share it with someone, and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next.